Ready to Hello, everyone. We're back and ready to start on our final leg of our journey together. So thank you for those of you who have stayed with us. It has been a fantastic day. I'm excited to get to the next couple of sessions, which will wrap up the event for us. Again, thank you to all of those who've participated throughout the day, presenters, and also to all of you online with us. We had almost 1,000 people who have been registered for this event who will be receiving this recording in whole. Some of them have been able to be with us for part of the day. Others will be enjoying the recording when they receive it. And we also know that we will be sharing it out with hopefully thousands more. So this is going to get a lot of distribution across the world. And we hope it will be the start of a conversation for all of us and taking some action steps as well. But we will certainly be with you on the journey, and we'll have other events around this topic from our Center for Business Champions. The session coming up is Building and Sustaining ECD Business Partnerships, Practical Steps for Taking Action. So get your notebook out, pens, use your computer, whatever you need to write down some of these practical steps. And we look forward to hearing from Sarah Watson, who is going to speak with us about the practical steps and also share with us a little bit from Victor Graça, who is someone that we have worked with in Brazil, working for a Fundaco Abring. So thank you so much, Sarah. Over to you.
Great. So nice to see you. I wish we could figure out who is in the latest time zone. Like if anyone is up past midnight your time, you get a medal, and you could even post that in the Q&A if you're up that late, so that we know. We're really excited to give you some just practical ideas about how to get started. We've been talking about this a little bit as people have asked that in the questions, and we'll have a wonderful conversation with Victor Graça, who is in the position a year ago. He was in the position that many of you are in, where he wanted to create a network of business champions and had to figure out how to get started. And I wanted to mention we will be offering a 6-week online training institute for early childhood leaders to go through practical steps. That first version that'll happen this May is full, kind of our test version. So we'll learn from that. And then we hope to offer a second version in the fall if we can raise the funds. And also it helps us to know how much demand there is for that. So in the chat, there will be a link to sign up to get more information about the Training Institute. If you think this is something you might be interested in, just want to get more information about the online Training Institute, please sign up for that, which will help us understand how much demand there is for that. So now we're going to give you a quick summary of some ideas on how to get ready to engage business, and then we will talk with Victor. So why don't we go ahead to the slides. So really the first thing to think about is, are you ready to work with business? You've heard this takes a significant amount of staff time. You need to know what you want them to do. You need to gather some information and data. So the first thing is, do your staff, your board, your funders agree that this is an important thing for you to spend time on? You also need to consider how your allies think about this, and a little bit we'll have another slide specifically on that topic. Is somebody else already working with business? Is there a competitor organization in your space that is already working with business? Do you have information that you need to make the business case in terms of maybe how many children are being served versus how many children need services? Is there any evidence that the services that you are advocating for make a difference in terms of children? And if not, can you get data? You can certainly use the studies that we've talked about that are based on global records or regional records, as well as thinking about other data that applies to your country. You want to look for likely business partners among industries that need skilled workers. You can look at business groups that work on education, and you need to think about how you'll staff this work. It does take time. As I mentioned, it's not something where you can just send out an email and then expect people to just come in and get started and go to work for children. Okay, next slide. So another thing to think about is, what do you want your network of business leaders to look like? You've heard some very large formal organizations, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can have a small network of people that maybe you ask to do specific things. Maybe they start off with a smaller project that is just volunteering at a local childcare program, for example, or you ask them to come with you to visit policymakers, but they aren't part of a big formal organization. It can be based at an NGO, at an organization that supports young children, or it can be based at a business group. And you've seen the Brazil example illustrates the first way, and then the Kenya example illustrates the second way. You can have the organization set up so that people take actions as a group, or take actions as individuals. In the similar way, you can have an expectation that companies will join to take actions as a company, or that you will have business leaders who will take action just as individual leaders with resources and networks. It can be a very big public organization where you publish the names. KEPSA's already got a beautiful website, a lot of publicity around their work. Or it can be a smaller private group that you work with, where you don't intend to get a lot of publicity. And they all have different goals and actions. And you've seen an illustration of that some of them are focusing on very young children, infants and toddlers. Some are focusing on a broader age range, maybe 0 to 12, and others may focus on the whole age range from early childhood to young adulthood. You might have them set up to do different actions, policy advocacy, the way KEPSA is, or more getting information out to the community about the importance of young children, the convening that the Royal Business Task Force, World Foundation Business Task Force is doing. So you can have them take actions that suit your agendas. Next slide. So responding to the question that people say is, where do you find them? There are millions of business leaders out there. That's why the potential to organize them is unlimited. But you have unlimited time. So where do you look for people who are more likely to be responsive to your request to look at the data and take action? So one is industries that require skilled local labor. Safaricom is a great example of that, the African telecommunications company. If companies need people to be be healthy and well educated in their local workforce, they're much more likely to be interested in initiatives that are going to help create that workforce. Same way that if industries that care about their public image, they have local customers who have many choices. That's another great industry to look at. Banks. There's a reason why the banks that were discussed in Kenya have developed the breastfeeding initiatives. And same way, when I worked in Uganda, with Private Sector Foundation Uganda, they had worked with Finance Trust Bank, who saw their own initiative to create lactation spaces in the lobbies of their banks, to be a way to distinguish themselves from their competitors. In the United States, a group called PNC Bank has taken on early childhood as their signature philanthropic issue because they see it distinguishes them from all the other banks that people have choices about. You can look for companies that have been recognized for family-friendly practices or other good business practices. Maybe they've done one thing within the walls of their company and they're ready to consider doing something bigger, to be involved in spreading what they have done to other companies, or to be talking to politicians about the need to prioritize early childhood. You can also look for people who are already involved in civic and business groups, such as chambers of commerce. As I mentioned, in most chambers of commerce, their mission is improving the economic and social well-being of the community in which their members operate. And so education and therefore early childhood are natural issues for them. We've had on other events that the Center for Business Champions have organized. We've had the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the CEO of the Greater Miami, Florida Chamber of Commerce on to talk about why they are supporting childcare and early childhood issues. And then you can look for different positions in the company. Managers with many employees, especially needing childcare. That's often the most powerful spokesperson because they directly see the impact of people not being able to come to work or not being able to advance in their careers, or not being on time or having to leave early, etc. And then obviously human resources and their CSR are also often avenues into a company, and you can enter that way and get access to the managers who have the direct experiences working with employees. So next slide. One of the things I wanted to mention, what if your allies and partners don't like the idea of your working with business? I have literally had people tell me that I am asking them to make a pact with the devil. That was their exact words, in terms of working with business. And it's, as we've mentioned, and we talked about this a little bit previously, there are businesses that do bad things. There are businesses that do bad things for children. There are businesses that do bad things for the environment, etc. So every group that wants to work with business needs to develop their own criteria for when they work with a business, how far they work with the business. Do they work with maybe one division of a business that is doing good things, understanding that another division is not doing good things? For example, at Ready Nation, we decided we were not going to work with companies that sold alcohol or tobacco, because they were marketing to children, and there is no safe amount of those products or good amount of those products for children, including youth. So we would not work with them. We would not take money from them. We just decided that that was not companies that we were willing to work with. There are other companies that I were very willing to be spokespeople for early childhood, and we decided on balance we wanted to work with them. But you need to make that decision for yourself, and just think about it ahead of time. So some of your allies are going to say they do evil things. What about child rights? And as we've talked about before, and both CRIB and Global Child Forum are really experts at this. There are some companies where your agenda is going to be stopping them doing the bad things. Child labor, violence against children, maybe products that are harming children. And Hopefully you can get them to a point where they see that not only stopping the bad actions, but also taking more proactive good actions is good for their company. And Gloria mentioned this as well. So from the Kenya Private Sector Alliance Foundation, that child labor is not a good sustainable business practice. So sometimes people think that the business leaders are that they won't talk about equity or justice. And this goes back to finding common ground in terms of your goals and using language that is comfortable for business, that but you know that it means the same goals that you want. They may not use words or terms that you are accustomed to, but if their goals are children being healthier, better educated, doing better in school, and good quality reliable childcare for parents, you've got the same goals. And the question is, how do you find language that you are both comfortable with, that engages them and moves forward on the goals that you hold together? Some people think they might try to take over. I've had people tell me, well, they're just going to come in and tell me they know how to run an early childhood program that should be run like a business, or they want to just decide what the law or policy should be. And in my experience, and you might have someone that does that, but in my experience, working with literally thousands of business leaders, asking them to take actions both at the company level and a policy level, they know what they don't know. And they don't want to be an early childhood expert. They want to come in and talk about what they are expert in, how to run a company with a workforce that can show up today, and a healthy, prepared workforce that they can use in the future. So that has been my experience, that they want to come in as the unexpected voice that is prepared to talk about the fact that they believe the research that investing in early childhood is going to produce these business goals. And then we mentioned early on, sometimes people think that our work, and maybe by extension your work, is about creating or supporting early childhood businesses. And so we just try to clarify early on that this work is about working with businesses outside the childcare sector. It's not about creating early childhood businesses, although childcare centers and programs obviously do have to operate like a business. Okay, going to the next slide. So how can we help you on your journey? And this is what the CBC was set up to do, that makes us different, that where we wanted to make a contribution that was different than what we saw these other wonderful, wonderful organizations doing. We want to give you skills, training, knowledge, examples on how you can build your own network of business champions. So as I mentioned, our next big step is a 6-week virtual training institute that we will do with a group of or about 25 early childhood leaders from around the world. So we'll do that initial training, we'll learn from it, beta test it, and then we hope to offer a second one in the fall if we can show demand for that. So thank you, Casey, for posting the link for people to sign up to get information about the Training Institute. And that way we will go into much more depth in terms of the practical steps on how you prepare to work with business, how do you find them, how do you set up that first meeting, how do you communicate with them, how do you prepare them to be policy advocates, etc. We'll also provide periodic updates from the Center for Business Champions with examples and evidence and successes. I'm so excited. Somebody posted in the chat about an example of a business group in South Africa that I had known about, but I'm very glad that Warren brought it to our attention. So we would love to be a resource for kind of a one-stop shop for examples of all of your great work from around the world. So I hope you'll send us your examples and of economic reports that you're working on, partnerships that you have with business, so that we can share that with the world. And then lastly, we would love to provide consultation and training for individual countries or cities or organizations that want to work with business. And we can provide a kind of hands-on training for a group of people that want to develop a business network. And that's very similar to the work that we did with Brazil. So with that, I am going to transition to a conversation with our dear friend, Victor Grassa. I think, yay, there you are, Victor. So nice to see you again.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you to inviting me to talk a little bit about our program here.
Very excited about your Champions for Children. So as I mentioned, or Diane mentioned, Victor is the superintendent of Fundação Brink in Brazil, which is a national children's organization that has a huge agenda to support young children in that country, from policy advocacy to program implementation, etc. And we had the great pleasure of conducting a session online training institute for their staff last year, and we had a wonderful experience working with a dozen of his staff, the program people, communications, research, fundraising, etc. And so it was a wonderful experience to work with them, and so we will learn from there. So I'm going to ask Victor a couple of questions. We have time to really understand what you're doing with Champions for Children. So can you tell us about the Champions for Children initiative and what's the purpose and
Sure.
how's it structured?
So difficult to talk after many great experience and after your presentation, because it's more or less what we are doing after your training here. So a Brink Foundation was founded by entrepreneurs. So we have in our DNA this kind of attitude. We are not against companies here. We work with them. So we start with the Toy Manufacturing Association. So the toy sector entrepreneurs started here, and we work as a bridge. We children who need help and people who wants to help. So we don't have directly programs and projects. And those founders, they brought their companies and they invited their friends, their other sectors entrepreneurs. So they were supporting a Brink Foundation for like 10 years. After that, and I need to say that we don't accept money from the government. So we need support from the people and individuals and companies. So we start to raise a number of donors, 50,000 individual donors, and other 5,000 companies who support us. So in the beginning was those big entrepreneurs. Now we have this social asset as these donors, but we understand that it's important to start a new generation of leaders here in Brazil who need to talk about children. So that's why we were together in Red Nation and those activities, and look us find you again and restart and reconnect this idea to have those leaders here. So we have a new generation of entrepreneurs here and a new generation here as employees and supporters. But we already have the founders in our board. So I think we need fresh air here. And that's the idea. So to restart to have, we are going to keep having the individual donors, the small companies giving us a small amount every month. But we understood that it's important to have a new generation of leaders, new champions, talk about children. We have a very strong space in the media for the environment, which is important. But as people said in the morning, the S of the ESG is very important too. So that's why we want to have a very strong program here in Brazil.
Can you tell us about how you're staffing the organization and what how you will develop requests for your business leaders to take different actions, or how will you develop what you want them to do?
In the beginning was really connect to our president. Nowadays we have a bigger staff. So we were 5 in the beginning, 35 years ago. Now we have 85 people working here. So as you said, you train people from our communication, fundraising, partnership, and this activity will be connected directly with me and our president, Sinesio, who you know, and Tamiris is supporting us, and we work helping to find these new champions with the support of the whole organization in, to build this new net.
And can you give an example of a business person that you talked to about this issue and they became interested in it, and what kind of information was convincing?
Sure. We decided to have as a goal 12 champions this year and between 30 and 50 next year, plus a data of 300 to 1,000 people that we are going to start to give them information about our organization. So we are not going to approach them, okay, let's talk about a Brink Foundation, let's talk about children, what we do, and maybe some months we're going to talk. For sure, in the beginning, we approach people that I know already know. So we have a director of a huge broadcast in Brazil, and the idea is to have her helping us put in the media the issue. Another one connect to the infrastructure, because we have a huge problem here with sanitation. So she's connected to children in another NGO. She knows about education, but she is have stocks of a huge company of sanitation, and we have this advantage that people know about us as a Brink Foundation because we've been working for 35 years. So it's not so difficult to open some doors. As I said, some are friends. So another one, Alexandre Furtado, who is helping us to talk about social credits, he opened some doors for us. So he helped us to invite other people. We already have 4 champions for now. We closed one today. It's connected to the financial area and banks. And he's very interested not only to talk about and have the children as helping us in advocacy, but he said that they're going to help us to raise money with their employees. They have more than 600 employees and 30,000 clients. They're going to put everything together to raise money to run a program here, early childhood program. It's a new one. And we are talking to a lawyer company, and this guy is connected to startups, which is another thing that we would be interested, IT and startups. Because here in Brazil, I don't know in other countries, the old companies, they have the programs and projects and their foundations, but startups and IT, they are new here, so they don't have the connection. And the last one is connected to another bank. So they are open to our cause, which is children, which is good. They have this, they know about us. So what's just kind of to show them that it's volunteer work you're not going to, I think you said that, we need to help them to work for us. So we are going to give them piece of information. They're not going to waste time, need to know how many percent of children out of, no, we're going to give them everything in a, then just help us to be in advocacy or run programs or doing fundraising. That's it.
I'm so excited to watch your progress. Are there any challenges or problems that you have had?
Agenda, it's always a, a massive challenge because they are very busy, so it's really difficult. And however, we did some online meetings, what was good. But to be honest, to do the last conversation to invite, I prefer to be face to face. So someone said, you can send your assistant to do this. No, the day that we want to ask them to be champions, I think we need to be face to face.
Yeah, we've talked about the fact that business leaders tend to move more quickly, have shorter time availability, and it's so helpful to hear that that is true in Brazil with its own country culture as well as other countries as well.
And the other thing I need to say to you, we need to thank you because you helped us a lot. The training was amazing, and so you are using a lot the presentations and the ideas that you give us.
Well, it was a great joy and an amazing level of commitment for you to send as many staff as you did. And it was wonderful to get to know them. So thank you, Victor. We greatly appreciate your sharing your wisdom with all of us. I want to mention that Anne from Kenya is still on the chat. She said she's been on since the beginning, and when we end, it will be midnight her time, and she is going to hang in there with us, which is so impressive and just illustrates, I think, how hungry people are for this practical examples like what you're doing in Brazil, Victor. So with that, we will wrap up this session, and let me go over to Yvette to take us on to the next session.
I'm going to pass it to Diane. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful session, Sarah. Thank you for all the practical tips. And Victor, it was wonderful to see you and wonderful to hear how you're progressing. So congratulations. We did have a short break lined up. I'm not sure if we should take that or move forward. But Yvette, if you could just
Yeah, no, just keep on. There is no break. We're just gonna,
Oh,
yeah, we're
there's
just
no
gonna
break.
roll into
We're gonna roll
introducing
on.
ECDAN session. Yeah.
All right, that is great. Thank you. I think my eyes are blurry as well, so I'm not reading my agenda properly at this moment. So thank you so much. So we are moving on to introduce our final session, a panel that ECDAN has graciously put together for us. Again, ECDAN is the Early Childhood Development Action Network, very well-known global organization that looks a lot at advocacy and all kinds of things to help to promote early childhood development everywhere in all countries. So I would like to invite back to be with us Elizabeth Lul, and I'll read a little bit about Elizabeth as she is coming on. She's the Executive Director of the Early Childhood Development Action Network, where she coordinates with the Executive Leadership Council to set the network strategy. She manages the Secretariat and leads partner engagement and fundraising. Elizabeth is a widely recognized expert on international development and global health issues, having devoted her career to strengthening global commitments and programs addressing the needs of women, adolescents, children, and infants. And the wonderful thing about this is we are going to talk about the innovative financing part of it. You're going to hear some things that you may not have heard of before, some things that you may think, oh, do I agree with that? We're going to be talking a little bit about outcomes, social impact, but take this all in stride. These are wonderful new things that are happening. And although we may not be used to the language, or we may still have kind of questions around some of these types of initiatives that are happening, we need to be there. We need to be there to hear all of this and understand all of the tools that we have available to us. So we're really, really excited to hear about the innovative ways that we can start to think about making a difference for young children. So Elizabeth, over to you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I seem to be having a problem with my video. I think the host stopped it for some reason and it hasn't come back.
Well, we can hear you very well.
That's good. So thank you for the introduction, Diane, and it's really a wonderful opportunity to organize this session on innovative financing, but also what an incredible day that we've had, and learning about all the good practices that are there, as well as the how-to. So it's my honor to welcome you to this important session on innovative financing for sorry, let me see if my video will work. No, it will not work. Let me just continue. Well, it keeps interrupting. Okay, sorry.
It's fine, and we can put the main slide up while you're speaking,
No,
if that's helpful.
it's fine. Let me just speak without the video, as long as my panelists will have their videos on. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So I think as we this session is about creating a shared vision and understanding, and exploring together how innovative financial mechanisms can transform the landscape for early childhood development and unlock the untapped potential of business investment in this area. And I think, as we know, traditional funding models alone cannot meet the global need for ECD, and that is already dwindling, as we've seen. So this session will explore how businesses can play a transformative role in financing ECD, moving beyond philanthropy to strategic investments that align with corporate priorities and economic sustainability. Our panelists will discuss the innovative financial mechanisms such as social impact investing, public-private partnerships, and catalytic financing, demonstrating how companies can leverage new models that can support their long-term business strategies and mobilize funding for ECD initiative globally. I think we will kick it off with Emily Gustafsson-Wright, who is a senior fellow at the Center for Universal Education, at the Brookings Institute. She specializes in applied microeconomic and policy research within the fields of education, health, and early childhood development in low and middle-income countries. And she's widely recognized as a global expert on innovative financing mechanisms, including public-private partnerships, payment for results, and social and development impact bonds. She's an economist, and over to you, Emily, to kick us off and help us understand what innovative financing means. Sorry, Emily, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you all for having me here. It's wonderful to join in this amazing event. What an incredible lineup of speakers today. I really enjoyed the last session. As Elizabeth mentioned, I am a scholar at the Brookings Institution based in Washington, D.C., and I have been researching innovative finance for ECD and other sectors for about a decade, and really came to this, I come to this with a researcher hat, so I'm really interested in understanding what the potential and limitations are of different innovative financing mechanisms, and really a sort of neutral and objective observer. So that's the role that we've played, like I said, for the past decade in this space. And the reason why we engaged in this, and we can go on to the next slide, is, as I'm sure you've heard many times today, the indicators related to the early years are really quite dire, and there's really an urgency that we address this. So not only this, but then in the next slide, we can see that we know that the return on investment is high, and we know that spending is low. And so we need to not only increase the volumes, but also increase both the efficiency and effectiveness of the spending that does exist. So in the next slide, I give an overview of innovative financing. And I find that this is really important because often when we're talking about innovative financing, it all tends to be thrown into the same bucket. And it sounds like this one sort of monolith of things, or this thing that exists. And really, innovative financing can mean many things. And primarily, I think it's important to distinguish between innovative sources of funding and innovative ways of delivering that funding. And excuse me, and it is, and so on the innovative sources side, we have things like sin taxes, airline taxes, carbon auctions, consumer donations, CSR, debt swaps, impact investors. And then on the innovative delivery mechanisms, we have two things: non-contingent disbursement and contingent disbursement. So on the non-contingent disbursement side, we have bonds and notes. For development interventions, we have guarantees for risk mitigation. We have unconditional cash transfers. And then on the contingent side, we have results-based financing, and public-private partnerships and blended finance can also include elements of this contingent disbursement. So what does that mean? What does contingent disbursement mean? So in the next slide, we have a typology of results-based financing. So results-based financing means that payment is only made if some agreed upon result has been achieved. And there are many different types of results-based financing, and these different types depend on who it is that holds that financial risk. And so in performance-based aid, for example, it's the national government. You can have the local government holding that financial risk. Also service providers, investors, and beneficiaries, as in the case of conditional cash transfers. My research has primarily focused on outcomes-based financing. So this includes social and development impact bonds. In the United States, it's called pay-for-success contracts. They aren't actually bonds. It is just a form of results-based financing. So impact bonds and outcomes funds are sort of the main area of my research, and you'll hear some more an example of that later from my colleague Louise, but I'll first describe a little bit what the landscape looks like in the next slide. So currently there are nearly 260 projects worldwide of these impact bonds, social impact bonds and development impact bonds across 40 countries. We maintain a database of all these projects. And so this is our the most updated data from our database. And in the next slide, you can see that the distribution across different sectors. So overall, we can see that the projects primarily can be found in the social welfare sector and employment sector, and then followed by education and health. And then if we break it down to projects that focus on the early years, most of those are in the social welfare sector. So this is projects that address perhaps children who are placed in out-of-home care, for example. And then we have 6 in the education sector and 2 in the health sector, and this is global. So across all high, middle, and low income countries. So in the next slide, we can see sort of what it is that that's being said, or that has been said, that impact bonds and outcomes funds can achieve. So in this type of results-based financing mechanism, investors, usually impact investors, provide the risk capital to service providers to deliver some service, so say preschool education. And then the government or a third party, like a donor agency or a foundation perhaps, agrees to pay those impact investors back their principal plus some return. So this is a really interesting way for the business sector to get engaged as investors in this space. So they provide the risk capital to the service provider, and the outcome funder agrees to pay them back if some agreed upon outcomes are achieved. So that could be an increase in learning outcomes, cognitive improvements in cognitive development or physical development, etc. And so when we started our research about 10 years ago, we identified these as sort of the 10 common claims that we were seeing in the literature. And we've tested these common claims over the last decade. And so what we've really seen is that that outcomes-based financing is really helping to shift the focus on outcomes. So the point being that payments are being made only when outcomes are being achieved. And this happens because there is a real focus on building a culture of monitoring and evaluation and driving performance management because of the desire to achieve these outcomes. It also incentivizes collaboration across different stakeholders between the private sector and the public sector, and encourages an investment in prevention. So we know early childhood is the best way to prevent poor outcomes from happening in the long term. And it tends to bring in new capital. So like I said, impact investors that are engaging in the space that might not have otherwise. We're starting to see greater scale. You'll see an example with the education outcomes now, outcomes fund you'll hear now from Louise. And then in terms of sustaining impact, we have some nice examples of that, but also a little bit hard to say as some of these are sort of in early stages. So I'll pause there, and hopefully we can have more of a conversation afterwards, and I'll hand over to Louise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily, for that introduction to innovative financing. And now we go to Louise Albertin, who is our Learning and Engagement Associate with the Education Outcomes Fund. Louise has a lot of experience in this area and has leadership experience, including at the Bertha Center for Social Innovation at the University of Cape Town Graduate School of Business, focusing on innovative education models and pathways to employment. So over to you, Louise, to share about the Education Outcomes Fund and also what you're learning. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, can you just confirm that you can see my slides?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Good day, colleagues. I'm honored to be talking to you today from Cape Town, South Africa, where the seasons are changing towards autumn. I'm equally honored to be sharing this panel with ECDAN. Thank you again, Elizabeth, Brookings Institution, and the Do More Foundation. My name is Louise Albertine, and I'm a Senior Associate at the Education Outcomes Fund. Today, I've been asked to share a bit more about leveraging one particular innovative financing instrument, as was discussed by Emily, at scale, and that is outcomes-based financing through setting up outcomes funds, which is really all about partnerships. And there's an opportunity for business to play a significant role in that. A little bit more about those partnerships and about the Education Outcomes Fund, or EOF. Established in 2018 through a collaboration between the Education Commission and the Global Steering Group for Impact Investment, our core mission is to improve learning outcomes for children and youth globally. Essential pillar of this is supporting governments to leverage innovative financing instruments at scale, particularly outcomes-based finance models. Our focus spans early childhood care and education, quality and basic education, and skills for employment. Since our inception, we've built expertise in designing, procuring, and contracting outcomes funds. Over the past 3 years, and what I think is particularly relevant to this group, we've significantly intensified our focus on ECCE. With the generous support of the LEGO Foundation since 2022, we've been exploring how OBF can drive increased access, improve child development outcomes, improve quality, and strengthen evidence generation in early childhood development. This partnership has already facilitated the development of 3 significant OBF programs for ECCE to be launched in the coming months in Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and South Africa. These outcome partnerships are a new type of PPP, partnerships for public purpose, that is driven by a shared commitment to achieving education outcomes for children. As Emily says, a shift towards outcomes. So, how does it work? You can pull funding from different sources, including government and donors, and that donor group can include both local and international businesses and other non-state actors, and contract different service providers to achieve a set of pre-specified outcomes for beneficiaries. So you can think about it as a tool that facilitates outcomes-based contracting at scale. 3 key steps in setting these up. Define the outcomes and designate funding. One or more multiple actors, as I mentioned, government and or non-state, pool funding, and the pre-specified outcomes are chosen. Next step is selection and contracting. Multiple service providers are contracted to achieve these pre-specified outcomes, and the stage can also include the selection of impact investors who can aid in pre-financing the service providers who might need that initial support. And the third step is the verification and payment. An external independent evaluation is carried out, and payment is made upon the successful achievement of outcomes. I'm also sharing a visual here if, like me, you are a specialist in education, not in finance. So sometimes, also most of the time, I also need the accompanying visual. Why might outcome funds be a particularly attractive option in ECCE? A growing number of governments, funders, and implementers are actively looking for more effective and efficient ways of supporting young children's optimal development. And in the face of a broader push towards increasing access to ECCE, there's a growing recognition of the need to go beyond access and to align all system level elements around quality and equity in ECCE. While we acknowledge that there's considerable transaction costs that can be associated with designing and implementing a single OBF program, we're encouraged by the increasing returns that mitigate these costs when an OBF model is scaled up at the national or global level. We believe this is particularly the case with the outcomes funds as they pool funding from one or more funders and contract multiple implementers to achieve a set of predefined outcomes. As I mentioned, payments from that fund only occur when the outcomes are achieved, which can be used to incentivize adaptive management and course correction during implementation. It is paying for what works. But we have a lot to keep learning, and we're doing our best to proactively learn from our peers and to incorporate the learnings from this first generation of programs in designing the outcomes funds. We're also committed to putting in internal and external processes to capture and share our learnings for external sharing. Our learning plans are, at one level, focusing on what we're learning about Outcomes Fund, but at the second level, also focusing on producing contextualized evidence on ECCE. It's one of the reasons many governments that we've been working with are interested in using outcomes funds, because it provides comparative contextualized evidence on what works better, for whom, and at what cost. In closing, I'd like to share the example of the Outcomes Fund to be launched in South Africa, which you may have guessed from my accent is where I was born and still call home. The government here has a goal of achieving universal access to quality EC in South Africa by 2030, which will require the establishment of thousands more ECD programs, as well as supporting all ECD programs to improve their quality progressively. This will require a level of investment that is not feasible for the South African government on its own and necessitates a public-private partnership approach. Similarly, the ECD sector has historically in South Africa been supported by strong non-governmental organizations that receive some significant financial support from the donor community in South Africa. Strategic collaboration between NGOs, donors, and governments can therefore lead to greater synergy in collectively expanding access and improving quality. So it's because of all these factors that the feasibility was in place for the Outcomes Fund to launch in early 2026. In the South Africa Outcomes Fund, the donor community will be matching government's 300 million rand, which is about $15 million, investment to support an estimated 100,000 children in 1,500 ECD programs. I'd just like to also acknowledge here that this massive commitment to ECD is also attributed to the relentless and evidence-based advocacy work of the ECD community locally. So I want to give a shout out to those of you in the audience doing that advocacy work that often doesn't feel like it's paying off till it does. It's evidenced by the words of South Africa's president a few weeks ago at the Bana Pile, meaning Children First, ECD summit that was held in South Africa, and are the words that I'd also like to end off with. His final sentence: as we move forward, we must remember that there is no greater cause than uniting for the benefit of our children. And it's been an honor today to join so many of you who are uniting for exactly that same cause. Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Louise, and thank you also for sharing about how important political commitment is by sharing what your president has been showing, and hopefully many other presidents will be learning from that as he leads the G20 processes this year as well. And we're very excited about the leadership also being provided by the Ministry of Basic Education as well, and look forward to the special event that is being organized about early childhood care and education. But most important, I think what you've just shared is one example where we can also improve efficiency of funding, of available funding, but also increase it at the same time, focusing on impact and scalability as well. So we also stay in South Africa, and we have another panelist, Warren Farah, who is the CEO of the Do More Foundation in South Africa, who is going to show us a real example of how we can leverage business CSR and to benefit communities around them. Over to you, Warren.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. Is the video showing up all right?
Yes, it is.
Brilliant. Yeah, good day, everyone. It really is a real honor to be part of this important conversation with Emily and Louise today. I'm going to share a South African model that's shifting how we think about corporate social investment, not as a charity, but as a driver of systemic change. The Do More Foundation was established 7.5 years ago and is a vehicle through which RCL Foods, one of the biggest food producers in South Africa with over 30 consumer brands, channels its corporate social investment. We've developed a model called Everyone Gets to Play, a collaborative, scalable approach that shows how local businesses can be powerful enablers in early childhood development. It's grounded in purpose, partnership, and long-term impact. There's an African proverb that guides our work. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Businesses hold immense power, not only in financial terms, but through networks, through people, infrastructure, and influence. When this power is channeled intentionally and collectively, we can achieve remarkable outcomes for young children. Before we set up the Do More Foundation, we realized that we could not achieve the scale we needed just with RCL Foods' funding as part of corporate social investment. When we set up the foundation, 100% of what we spent in communities was funded by RCL Foods. Today, less than 20% of what we spend in community is funded by RCL Foods, despite the fact that RCL's funding has increased over the last 7.5 years. But what has happened is that we've partnered and collaborated with many more organizations and businesses in South Africa. Today, I'll share some key learnings and show how Everyone Gets to Play provides a practical pathway for strategic, purpose-led collaboration. South African companies spend about 11.8 billion each year on what we call corporate social investment, but the impact is often limited. Corporate social investment is when businesses use their money or resources to support projects that benefit society, showing that they care more than just about profits. These projects are usually outside of their regular business activities. In South Africa, corporate social investment is encouraged by what we call the broad-based Black economic empowerment, BBEE framework. While not all companies need to follow the BBEE, those wanting to work with government and state-owned enterprises, NGOs, and private organizations need to comply and contribute a percentage of their net profit after tax to corporate social investment. So you might be asking yourself, why is most corporate social investments impact limited? Well, because much of the spend is fragmented. It's compliance driven and reactive. Many businesses scramble to spend unallocated funds at year end with no long-term strategy. So we need strategic intentionality, a focused investment in something that truly matters, like early childhood. When we step back and look at the child's ecosystem, and many of you will be very familiar with what I'm showing on the screen, we see how interconnected their needs are, from nutrition, caregiving, early learning through play, health, protection, infrastructure. These aren't isolated needs, they're part of a system, and we cannot fix one without the others. That's why early childhood must be approached through a systems lens, integrating multiple responses into one coherent, community-based strategy. The systems shift requires businesses to move from isolated projects to enabling platforms. Instead of funding outputs, we focus on supporting outcomes, the kind that ripple across generations. When corporate social investment is aligned with national policy, business transformation goals, and local needs, it becomes a strategic lever. It builds trust, relevance, and real value, not just for communities, but for businesses too. Everyone Gets to Play is our foundation's flagship model, built using the South African National Integrated ECD policy as its roadmap. It delivers a full basket of services to children as per what many of you will be familiar with, as per the Nurturing Care framework. It flexes depending on community needs and different contexts, that green part at the top. At the bottom, it is supported by DoMore's backbone, and we create opportunities for businesses to contribute, whether it's linking their brands, their operations, and their purpose to real, lasting community change. This model doesn't operate in silos, and that's why it's attracted both national and business investment. It gives partners visibility and measurable return on investment. So, for example, on the left-hand side, CHEP is a global pallet organization. They came on board to support small enterprises to make wooden toys with their waste wood from their pallets. RCL Foods, as an example, has a brand called Yum Yum Peanut Butter, and they partnered with the foundation in supermarket stores called Spar nationally with a cause-related marketing campaign. So these are just two very small examples of work that we've done as a foundation of working with businesses here. Central, though, to the model's success is the backbone organization. As the Do More Foundation, we play this role, enabling coordination, holding the shared agenda, and building capacity. Of course, we don't drive everything. We create space for others to lead. The best backbones foster trust, consistency, and long-term collaboration without becoming the center of attention. This structure keeps the work aligned while enabling it to grow. The power of this model lies in how it's been designed for replication. First, it's grounded on a national policy. I mentioned the South African Early Years ECD policy, which gives it legitimacy and consistency. Second, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Each community can adapt the model to their needs. Third, its modular design allows us to start small, and in many instances where we are involved, starting with nutrition and parenting programs, and growing to a fuller basket over time. And finally, it only works with the presence of a backbone organization that can hold the process and coordinate partners effectively. So you might be asking yourself, what can business do? I say, start by focusing support or corporate social investment on one issue where you can go deep. Then partner with a backbone organization that understands systems change and who can support coordination. Don't aim to do everything. Aim to do one thing well in partnership with a long-term view. That's how I believe businesses can move from simply giving to growing impact. To close, here are 3 key messages I'd like to leave you with. Businesses can be a catalyst for systems change if we invest in platforms and not symptoms. The everyone gets to play model provides a replicable framework for business-supported, community-led early childhood development. And none of this works without a strong backbone, supporting systems, not replacing them, and helping communities lead their own development. Thank you. I hope this sparks some inspiration for new forms of investment and partnership. Really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Warren. That was truly inspiring. And just to check in with Yvette, we have time for questions?
We do have time for questions, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start with you, Warren. With what you have shared, how do you ensure that the businesses that are investing stay there for the long term rather than, you know, short-term investments and then they go away? Because I think from your presentation, it's impact, it's partnerships, it's scalability, it's replicability of what works as well. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think as a nonprofit, you need to secure funding from different sources. Corporates, certainly corporate social investment is an annual kind of thing that you need to engage with businesses annually. I think what's really important, what we've learned, is you need to give businesses what matters to them. And I was listening to Sarah, I think, talking earlier. You need to understand what businesses need and provide that to them. And I think consistently, where we have done that, we've continued our support with corporates. But I mean, it is a challenge, particularly when corporate social investment is based on companies' annual financial targets and is a annual budgeted thing. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Warren, and hopefully we can replicate what you're doing in South Africa to other countries as well. And I have a question for Louise. How can we stay in touch with what's happening with the Education Outcomes Fund and what you're learning in the 4 countries, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and now what you're starting in South Africa as well?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Excuse me, I'll perhaps take liberty there to extend it to continuing to learn from the broader ecosystem, because I mean, the company here of somebody like Emily, who has informed a lot of my thinking about this. So I think definitely a first place to start is to follow many of the key researchers in this space, and follow the learnings that they are sharing. And secondly, to join some of the networks in the space that are pursuing learning at the intersection of innovative finance and early childhood development. ECDAN being one of them, another one being Afghan, who's very intentional about creating these learning opportunities for us as ecosystem members. And then in terms of our work and what we're learning, I think there's something that we, excuse me, are quite intentional about is setting up peer-to-peer learning networks. And of course, in order for them to be spaces where people can really grapple with the nuts and bolts of these innovative mechanisms. It's often relatively closed door in the sense that it's for people who are already working with these mechanisms. But what we're intentionally doing there, for example, with the Collective Learning Initiative, where we're joined by NORAG and GoLab, is that we'll be hosting 2 open webinars in the course of the year, where we'll be inviting the sector to come and learn with us. And we'll be sharing some of the learnings that have been surfaced by this collective, as Warren said, that importance of going at it together. And then, as you are well aware, Elizabeth and Emily, we have a similar peer-to-peer learning network with our colleagues at the Education Finance Network. And in that same way, we look to surface the learnings coming from that collective, and we'll definitely be publishing that. So please also do follow us on LinkedIn, and I'll also share my email address if you'd like to be kept up to date on the technical briefs we'll be releasing in the course of this year. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you so much, Louise. And I have a very difficult question for our economist, Emily. One of the challenges of innovative financing, especially for the investors from the private sector, is the issue of sharing the risks. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on how the public sector and the private sector can mitigate the risks of private sector investments.
Sure. Happy to take that. It is indeed a difficult question. The way that I see it is that risks are also opportunities, or rather investments in the longer term. And I was just in a conversation this morning with the Global Fund, actually talking about outcomes-based financing for health, and speaking about sort of the current landscape, and how we're in this space of budgets are constrained, and perhaps some actors are less willing to take on risk, but at the same time, what we really need to be doing is thinking about sort of long-term resilience. And so I sort of tend to sort of flip it on its head and say, okay, really, how do both the public and the private sector share the responsibility for that longer term investment and resilience building and strengthening of the institutions that are providing the services and those that are funding them, and sort of systems strengthening. Yeah, that's my answer to that. And I think that, and I think that sort of my feeling is, and having worked with the Global Business Coalition for Education in the past, and engaged also with Sarah Watson and the amazing work that she's done over the years, is that I think that the business sector really gets that also, is that right, that those you do have to take those risks to get the returns, and I think to some extent more than often the public sector, and so that's why I think it's important to bring in the different types of stakeholders who are willing to take on different levels of risk in different circumstances. And I think we heard that also from Warren, and also in the examples of the Education Outcomes Fund.
Thank you so much, Emily. And I think obviously, perhaps just to add, that the public sector has to play its role as well in ensuring accountability, and as well as regulatory mechanisms in place as well to protect the investments. I have another question for you, Warren. You mentioned one business CHEP in your presentation. Could you elaborate on how practically they have supported early childhood?
Yeah, so CHEP is a really interesting example and a really heartwarming example, actually. So CHEP, like I said, globally circulate pallets and carry goods on wooden pallets. RCL Foods is a big food manufacturer and use and partner with CHEP. CHEP had an issue with some waste wood and had this waste wood, and we're like, what do we do with this waste wood? And so we brainstormed with them the possibilities of repurposing the waste wood and making wooden toys that met cognitive issues that we know exist for communities that we're working with. And so what we did is we helped differently abled youth to make these wooden toys. And what we did is we connected with our corporate partners to buy these toys in kits. And the corporate partners would buy the toys from the differently abled home, providing that home with funding, as well as the differently abled youth with funds, and then distribute those wooden toys to communities. And so, CHEP on the one side, having the circular economy, sustainability, use of waste materials, and us having the benefit to young children, but also to differently abled youth. So that was a really good example, and we've done that a few times with other organizations. A massive printing company in South Africa that had white areas that they weren't printing, but still was going through the printer and using that white space to print learning material for children. So tens of thousands of pieces of learning material was placed on this white space, providing resources to, as we know, resource poor communities.
Thank you, Warren. I'm very mindful of how late it is for some of the participants. So just one last question to you, Louise. Do you anticipate moving to adding more countries to the Education Outcomes Fund? And if so, how do countries get interested or become part of this wonderful program that you're scaling up?
Thanks, Elizabeth. The first answer is quite simple. It's yes. We do intend to. There's already a series of countries in the pipeline where we'll be having discussions with government. And as you would have seen from our presentation, our particular model is quite focused on aligning with the needs of government and letting that inform the outcomes. And then there's most definitely an opportunity to engage with us and also learn more about it. And a particular example of that is in the coming months, you will see a practice brief that will be released through the good people at the Global Schools Forum that serves as an overview document to particularly government stakeholders who are interested. It's not a how-to design an outcomes fund, but it does help you to understand what the design process entails and perhaps what the contextual fit would be for what you're hoping to achieve in your country. So we're also happy to share that with this network.
Okay. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our panelists for their excellent presentations and sharing. This is just the beginning of the conversation. I think they will share their contacts, and please, I encourage you to get in touch if you have other questions. And we definitely intend to work with both Brookings Institute as well as the Education Outcomes Fund to begin to unpack innovative financing mechanisms in this year going forward. And as I mentioned this morning, we hope to have an in-face meeting early 2026. And also just to mention that the UNESCO Global Monitoring Report will be focusing on financing. So there are many opportunities to input and collectively contribute to really addressing some of these financing issues. But the panelists have demonstrated that we have the tools to unlock unprecedented opportunities for children worldwide, while strengthening communities, businesses, economies, and society well-being. And to scale up ECD programs and to get the impact we want, we must embrace innovative finance as a catalyst for systemic change, as the panelists mentioned. By leveraging partnerships, technology, and creative risk sharing, we can turn aspirations like universal education into a reality, and also universal healthcare as another reality that is important to children, especially with all the funding cuts now. The time to act is now, because innovation is in finance is not just an option. It's a necessity for our sustainable future. So let's seize this moment to innovate, invest, and inspire change for the next generation. Thank you so much, and over to you, Diane.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. It was an absolutely wonderful panel, very inspiring, very thought-provoking. Thank you to Emily and Louise and Warren as well. So we will definitely be in touch with you, Elizabeth, and looking at ways that we can keep this momentum going. It's been a very exciting day. So thank you so much for your efforts on this panel. Appreciated. All right, so we are going to wrap up. So if you can bear with us for just another couple of moments, we're going to go to some key takeaways actually from the session. You don't need to hear me read all of these, and please use your phone if you want to take a picture of some of these key takeaways if you are not able to absorb it this late in the day. Early childhood investment is a smart and urgent economic strategy. Collective action unlocks transformative generational impact. Strategic business engagement delivers value. Adaptable partnership models are essential, and outcomes-based financing is transforming ECC. So, and I think Emily had put into the chat to contact her. She also teaches an outcomes-based financing course. So that's something that you may be interested in. So we're going to move to close the session. We're going to pull up a quick slide about what this has all been about today and give you a little bit more information, but it's been an incredible journey. When I think about, we've come through sort of talking about so many things, but when you kind of condense it down, it's sort of scalability, replicability, sustainability, increasing impact, systems change, systemic change. It just has been an amazing, amazing time. So there we go. 5 key takeaways from this forum. Early childhood investment is smart. These are indeed the takeaways from the forum. So there we go. So thank you so much. So I hope that those takeaways have really sort of highlighted what we felt were the important sort of messages that came across in this global forum. And I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to the director of the Center for Business Champions, Sarah Watson, to say a few final words.
So my job is to say, you can do it, and we can help. For 20 years, I have heard from early childhood leaders and business leaders that they both see the need for childcare as well as for children to grow up healthy, educated, successful in whatever way they choose, etc. But they don't know how to work together. So early childhood leaders say, we organized a big meeting, we invited them and nobody came. Or somebody came, they looked in the door, they looked at the agenda, they turn around and left. Or business leaders will say, I came to the meeting, I did not understand most of what was said, and I have no idea what it is that I can do. These are all fixable barriers to creating a successful collaborative partnership that can help you accomplish your goals for children and families in your country. So we want to help you do that. We will be developing and creating and collecting more tools, examples, resources for you, offering training for you. We want to be your help in just taking the very practical steps from the very beginning in developing relationships with business that can help improve the lives of your children and families. I especially wanted to echo Diane's thanks for the CE International staff. If you can imagine, so many hours behind the scenes organizing everybody. I'm so impressed that I think all of our speakers showed up early. We were even running a little early so we could finish early. They all showed up. Nobody had last minute emergencies, which is amazing for those of you who have organized conferences. Absolutely amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you to the speakers. Thank you for people who are hanging in with us. We keep saying that Africa is a really fertile place to do this. And I see in the chat, we have people from South Africa, Uganda, and Kenya who've said it's almost midnight their time and they are still hanging with us. So thank you very much. It's a real honor to get to know the panelists that I haven't met before, and we'll be really delighted to work with you. So back to you, Diane, to close us out.
Thank you. So from CE International, Childhood Education International, and the Center for Business Champions, we thank you so much for the work you do, for the change that you're making in children's and families' lives and in your communities. And we look forward to working with you more as we move together on this journey. There is our contact information. Please do contact us. And you heard Sarah say it. We have resources, trainings, things that are available to you to help you move on this journey. Thank you so much for being with us, and we hope to see you again.